Today, we funded 20.
We as a nation do not have to go into debt to have a currency.
Ready?
Okay.
Check it out, people. Remember last week I told you guys about that term I wanted you guys to look up, collectivism? I learned it from him because I took the day off work. Like I told you guys, I take a lot of days off work to report the news to you guys. And I knew he was coming to speak at Fresno State, so I wanted to do my research on him. And when I learned about that phrase collectivism, that's when I shared it with you. So I asked this gentleman from the kindness of his heart to explain collectivism to you guys. So coming from the horse's mouth. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
So can you just tell the people about collectivism?
Okay, very good. Well, collectivism is an important word in our world today, and it's one that people aren't using very much. 80 years ago, books on political philosophy were loaded with that word. Everybody knew the word collectivism, but it's fallen out of use, fallen into disuse. So let's start from the beginning. Collectivism is a concept. It's an ideology of the proper function of the state. It's an ideology which says that the state should be all-powerful. It should all power to do everything. It's the organizer of society. It's the creator of all that's good. It's the solver of all problems. And that people should be subordinate to the state. So it's the concept of big, powerful government and small people who are supposed to serve the interests of the state. And it's got another quality to it. The quality is that the people are supposed to love it. They're supposed to like it because they believe that that arrangement is best for society.
Yeah.
Because it's the greater good for the greater number. If people do not have individual will, they're not troublemakers. We hear a lot about being a good team player and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And we are sort of programmed this way in our society.
I told you guys that.
Yeah, we're programmed to be team players. And so, well, he's too much of an individualist. He doesn't go along with the group. He's a little strange, all of that sort of thing. And so we've been conditioned to think that to go along with the group and serve the group, the best interests of the group, is good for society. Well, it turns out that there are a lot of problems with that. And I know when I went to school, I was pretty well taught that collectivism was a good thing because it's based, the most fundamental principle of collectivism is that the group is more important than the individual.
Yeah.
And that the individual must be sacrificed, if necessary, for the greater good of the greater number. Right? Now, you think about that for a minute, it sounds good, but absolutely all of the great atrocities of the modern age, all of the aggressive wars that have been started, all of the genocides that are committed, all of the great crimes against humanity, the leaders of those crimes say, well, we did it because it was in the best interest of society, or the best interest of the state. And too bad about having to sacrifice those few people, but it was really, in the long run, for the good of all. And that is such a terrible concept, you see. And as long as you buy into the idea that there is such a thing as a group that has rights above the rights of an individual, you're kind of stuck because you don't know how to argue against that. The truth of the matter is that the group, this concept that we call group, doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
It's just an abstraction in the mind. There's no such thing as a group. You can't touch a group. You can't see a group. You can touch individuals, you can see a bunch of people over there, and we call that vision or that concept of more than two people, we call that group. But it doesn't really exist. It's a mathematical concept, an abstraction in the mind. And so when we say that this thing, group, is more important than an individual, we're making a big mistake, because what we're setting ourselves up for is for demagogues to step forth and say, I speak on behalf of the group. I represent the group. I am the leader of the party, or something like that. Adolf Hitler spoke for the group. The Nazi Party was the leader of the state. Lenin and Stalin spoke for the group. The Communist Party was the leader, and Mao Zedong, the Communist Party was the leader of the state and represented the people. So everything was always done in the name of the people, but really it was just the will of the leader of the little power clique that controlled the state. So we set ourselves up for that
Yeah.
when we accept this idea of collectivism. And so today, unfortunately, we see in the United States, our country has gone way down this path of collectivism. And I don't care what the government does that we don't like.
Yeah.
If we start to complain about it, they say, be quiet, it's in the best interest of the nation, it's in the best interest of society. And I guess we better be quiet about that then.
Yeah.
So that's my complaint, that collectivism is not in the best interest of the individual. And as a matter of fact, when you really think about it, what is best for the group, this concept, is to preserve the rights and dignity of the individual.
Yeah.
That is what's really best for the greater good of the greater number.
Yeah. One thing I thought was really interesting is that one thing that you said in the video that I watched about you, that one thing the Republicans and Democrats both share is that collectivist mindset.
Oh yes, there's no question about it that the political system in America, divided between Republican Party and Democrat Party, is the same as almost in every other country in the Western world. We have the two major parties, and they battle with each other over relatively minor issues, but it sure seems like a big battle going on.
Yeah.
Big battle. But when you look at what the really important issues are, they're in total agreement.
Yeah.
And this is sort of not by accident. They know that what they need to do is, well, let me back up again. There is a book written by a former professor at Georgetown University. His name is Carroll Quigley. And
I told you guys that.
yeah, well, it's an important book. It's a big, thick book and kind of boring reading, but it's loaded with important history. And Carroll Quigley is important for a couple of reasons. First of all, he was Clinton's mentor when Clinton went to school, and so Clinton got along very fine with Quigley, and I think it was Quigley that got Clinton appointed to the Rhodes Scholarship.
Yeah.
Because the reason Quigley is important, and the reason I'm mentioning it, is he wrote this book called Tragedy and Hope.
I told you.
And Quigley was considered to be the historian of one of the most amazing real-life conspiracies the world has ever seen.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a name. I mean, you talk about a conspiracy. These people decided originally, we're not going to have a name, guys, because if you have a name, people can talk about you.
Yeah.
So they never really had a name, and even Quigley himself refers to it as the group, and sometimes, the Quigley group. Not the Quigley, I got it wrong again, but the Rhodesian group, because this secret society was created by Cecil Rhodes on his deathbed. One of the wealthiest men of all time, as you probably know. He was the Chancellor of South Africa, had personal possession of most of the diamond mines there, and a lot of the gold mines, fabulous wealth, and very powerful in British politics. But when he died, he left all of his wealth not to his family or to his heirs, but to create a secret society. And that's how we know about it, because there was a book written by the administrator of his will called William Stead, or Steed, I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's S-T-A-D. And he describes the wills and where the money went and what it was for. And where it went is to the creation of a secret society that Cecil Rhodes said should literally control the world from behind the scenes. Now, this is Cecil Rhodes speaking.
Yeah.
And he said the way we will do this is that we will send our people into the power centers of society and quietly work from behind the scenes. We will control all the major organizations that determine the political life of a nation. We will control, he said, the political parties. We will control the newspapers, the media centers. We will control the labor unions.
Yeah.
We will control education. That was very important. But we will do it quietly. Nobody will even know we're doing it, and we will meet secretly. This is now part of the public record.
Yeah.
And Quigley wrote about this in this book. And the reason I mention that, there's much more to say on it than this, but Quigley comes to the point where he says, so how do we control the world? And he was identifying with them. He was part of that group, really. He said, how do we control the nations of the world and still let people have a vote? He says it's easy. All you have to do is control both political parties and let them fight it out.
Yeah.
And no matter which way they go, we still are in control.
And that's why we keep going down the same road.
Well, that was what Quigley said. He said that's how it has been done in American politics. He didn't talk about other countries, but he was very specific about the American politics. He said that as long as the major topics and major principles and issues do not change, you can have all the fighting going on that you wish on secondary issues. So when you look at the major issues in American politics today, I would say probably at the top of the list would be two. The one is the continuing of America as a nation. Yeah. Its sovereignty. Yeah. Is it going to continue as a nation, or is it going to be gradually absorbed into what those people like to call the New World Order,
yeah,
which is a globalist system based on the model of collectivism? We're back to that word again.
Back to the word.
They know definitely what they want. And that was one issue. And the other issue is, what is America going to have as a monetary system? Is it going to be a sound monetary system based on gold or silver, or is it going to be fiat money that can just be created out of nothing? Is its value going to go down? Is it going to go broke? Is it, so forth. Two major issues for the survival of America.
Yeah.
Neither of those issues will ever be discussed by the Republican or the Democrat Party. That is absolutely taboo, because the leaders of both parties agree on those issues. They agree that America must be dissolved as a sovereign nation. They agree that it must continue with fiat money, and it must continue under the Federal Reserve System, and that is how they're going to finance this collectivist empire.
Yep.
So we're back to the question, is there a difference between the political parties? And the answer is very little.